Our last inductee today is Wendylee Stott. Wendy is being inducted in the academia category as well. And this girl, is helping influence all us fishermen. And I found it very interesting to read her bio and know what she's doing now. Wendy was here in 80 to 85, so she's one of the younger people that we've inducted, actually. And she is what I would call a science sports person, because she's got both of those things to her credit. She credits the science department here with getting her started, and the excellence that excellent way they taught her. And she went on to the University of Guelph. She was, I guess, a couple of decades behind you, Ed. And she got involved in molecular biology techniques. Once again, I have no idea what this stuff is, but and population structure. And how she developed this into the fishing side is that she developed an interest in fisheries management. And she had some great people that she mentored with and went on to do graduate work, and then started traveling up and down the St. Lawrence in a research vessel. Spent lots of time in Algonquin Park chasing fish, and then went on to McMaster University to get a doctorate. And she worked with M&R here in the province. She's been part of the Great Lakes fishery research. She's now, she accepted a position at the Great Lakes Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, doing research in this area. And she's developed programs and using programs doing genetic technology to develop economical, efficient, reliable procedures to evaluate species and stock identity in the Great Lakes region. You can explain that later. She chases fish, I think. And one of her crowning achievements to date, and I'm sure she's going to have more, is that she was a keynote speaker last year at a symposium, a international symposium in Poland. And I'm going to try to pronounce what it was about. I've asked around and no one knows what this one word is. It was a symposium on biology and management of corrugated. She can tell you later. Fishes. So she was a keynote speaker, and that's quite an achievement. She's athletic, and for us ex-jocks, we appreciate this. She's in hockey and dance, kayaking, kendo, and her hockey, for us hockey guys, she was on the Ontario Women's Hockey Association AAA Division winners in 2001, so she knows how to stick handle. I'd like to introduce to you Wendylee Stott.
Well, I'd like to thank the committee members and congratulations to my fellow inductees. This was an unexpected and most pleasant honor. I always seem to end up in the slot before lunch at conferences, and I know that before lunch or before breaks, so I know that people are always anxious to get on the food, so I'll attempt to be brief. First and foremost, I'm a goalie, so my stick handling is all.
Oh, sorry.
My stick handling tends to result in penalties. So, just thought I'd make that comment. There's been a lot of similar themes I've noted in the speakers of the previous three speakers, so rather I'll probably be reiterating them, and as I said, just attempt to go through them briefly, that excellence does not occur in a vacuum, and there have been a lot of influences on my life to date, and many of them occurred here, within my family and within the coworkers that I've had throughout my career. Just to mention my coworkers first, none of them were able to come. Just to mention the fine sort of mentorship and example that has been sent to me, was set for me by my master's and my PhD supervisors, Moira Ferguson at the University of Guelph and Peter Eason, who was a research scientist with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. Both these people set an excellent example for both researchers and as people that I've always tried to sort of attain as I've gone along in my career. My work with Peter Eason was actually done just down the road here at the research station that was on Dufferin Street that was closed a few years ago. So even though I haven't been back to KCSS since I graduated, I was living in the area for quite a long time. Now within my family, I was raised in this area and grew up in this area, and was, I think, very lucky in having a family that nurtured my curiosity from a very early age, and that has been a factor in my career. And I think a big influence in that is my mother, who is here today, who was always very nurturing of my curiosity, even when it led me to things that, like fish, in which she had no interest herself. When I wanted to go out and, she always mentions the time we went to Florida and I spent my week on the beach putting together the bones of a fish to build a fish out of the bones I found on the beach. She always mentions that, and I think that she thought that was a little weird, but hey, she kept on encouraging it. And my brother is also here today. He's also been supportive in many ways and sort of trying to explain often the complicated sort of aspects of the work that I do. King City was, I think, another sort of spawning ground for the work that I do now in terms of getting me started on the right path into pursuing a career in research. Some of the teachers that were influential in doing that have already been mentioned, and again, the science department here was a big influence and was a very good department, science and math. Greg has mentioned, and I was going to mention it too, the fact that there was a computer programming and a computer science department here that gave you the ability to work with computers very, very early on in the explosion of that technology. And the thing that I remember most was that it was not only that we were taught how to use them, is that they were not treated as toys, and we were taught how to code and work with computers in a very logical and organized fashion, which at the time was terrible, having to write pseudocode and what the heck does this mean. But later on, I came to appreciate the discipline that I learned very early on. Became very useful, and I was somewhat, in later sort of work at school, was somewhat, other students were somewhat envious of this thing that I'd learned very early on that helped me in later courses. Again, people I see in the audience here, Dr. Smirka in the biology courses, and Dr. Campbell and Dr. Sanderson and academic, Dr. Smirka, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Sanderson. The start that I got in the harder sciences, math and biology, the things that I learned there were set me up in my university career. I was very well prepared. I filed for my undergraduate and my graduate degrees at Guelph and McMaster University, and I'm not the only one that shares this. Several of my people that graduated in the same year from here, oddly enough, ended up in the resource management business, and we all agree that the start we had at King City set us well upon our way to becoming excellent biologists. Research is not only a matter of hard science. There is, I think, more creativity involved in it than most people are aware of. And I think that also the creativity and approaches that I can bring to the work that I do that are much appreciated were also nurtured here in the English and also the phys ed department, surprisingly, because I feel that getting out and getting some exercise is a really good way to think. That I find that sometimes if I'm stuck in a problem, going for a walk or whacking someone over the head with a stick often helps. And the department here, the phys ed department, the Shevaloviches, Mr. Sargentson, were always great, very supportive, and as been mentioned previously, I think went above and beyond to make sure that we were transported all over the province to do the various sports that we did. And finally, the English department here, Mr. DeGravio, I think the creativity and enthusiasm that I bring to the writing and the work that I do began in many ways in the school with the things that I learned here. Finally, some other people in my professional career who also aren't here today that I'd like to thank are two gentlemen that recently have been sort of mentors to me. First is a fellow by the name of Dr. Chris Goddard, and he is currently the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which is based in Ann Arbor. And when I first met him, it was when I was working at the research station down here, and he was the director of that research station. and we met, and he's been a great influence and a great mentor in my career. And he was also, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources has an annual hockey tournament, and he recruited me to play on the MNR team, and I was one of the first women to play in this tournament, which is predominantly a men's tournament. But I was one of the first teams that had a female player, and he was the fellow that recruited me. And every place I go and every place he introduces me, he always introduces me with a hockey story. How he met me over the hockey. So the sports aspect, surprisingly, has been very helpful to my professional career. It's totally unexpected, but that has how it has worked out. The other fellow to thank is Tom Todd, who is my supervisor at the Great Lakes Science Center. He's been a very excellent supervisor in the 5 years that I've been there, very helpful. And particularly with this keynote address that I gave the Corrigan Symposium, he was the one that kind of urged me to pursue giving and being chosen to present that address. And I'm really thankful for the support that he has given me, along with everyone else. And again, I'd just like to thank the committee and inductees, and let's go have some snacks.